I'll give you guys a little introduction. I'm sure you don't need it, but of course, author of the one of my favorite Merlin books. And this is the one that you have recently redone, right? So you have a new one, a new version coming out?
Longer, about a third longer, and with new translations,
Excellent.
which is what we're going to be using here today.
Okay, go for it. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Well, hello everybody listening in all sorts of places around the world. We're going to talk a little bit. I'm just going to do a very brief introduction to the poems of Myrddyn Wyllt, Merlin the Wild, who, for the sake of argument, we will call Merlin, although we don't really know if Merlin and Myrddyn are the same person, but certainly they've been associated with that for a long time. We're going to be reading some poems that have come down to us in Welsh from the Middle Ages, which may in fact not be by Merlin at all. We don't actually know that for sure. They've been attributed to him for a very long time, but they do tell a story, and it's a story that really grows out of the same place as what Marcus has been talking about. They might not come from the same source. I think there's no doubt at all that Geoffrey of Monmouth knew these poems and that he extracted quite a lot of information from them into his Vita Merlini. But what we tried to do here, and rather than talking about the poems, rather than trying to explain what they might mean, we wanted you all to hear them as much like poetry, the way they would originally have been heard. Not chanted perhaps as the bards might have done, but just spoken, and that's the way that we've translated them, because there have been other translations, obviously. The earliest ones and the most unreliable ones are by Skene. They're pretty much wrong in so many ways that it's not even worth going into it, and they don't sound right either. And the problem that's happened with the people who've attempted to translate Merlin's poetry in the past is they've looked at what the Welsh meant, but not at what the words meant, if you see what I mean, or the metaphor, indeed. Yeah. Because as with all poems, metaphor is very, very, very important. So what we've tried to do with this is to present the poetry as poetry. It's still as accurate as I can make it, but it is not exactly the same, perhaps, as some of the other versions you've heard or may have read, because I wanted them to be read as poetry and not just as exact translations of the words of the original. That doesn't mean I've changed anything, just the choice of words, the rhythms, and so on have changed a little to try and make them as clear as possible. And I think by now, if you've been listening today, everybody knows about what the poems describe, because they basically are the same story as you have in Geoffrey of Monmouth. The story of Merlin being driven mad, having taken part in the Battle of Ardrey. And from that point on, he's wandering in the woods, he's mad, he's talking to the trees, to a little pig, to a wolf, and eventually, and later on, to his twin sister, Gwentheve, who comes to live with him at the end of the story. So there's quite a lot of stuff in this material that's new to the general idea of Merlin. And I wanted to say, I was trying to type this in as a chat into the chat, and I accidentally deleted it. But I wanted to respond partly to Justin's last question about Merlin the wizard, because I've been through all of the texts that refer to Merlin, the earliest ones and the later medieval ones, and nowhere is he actually called a wizard, an enchanter, or a magician. It's like people understand that. They kind of understand what he stands for, so they never actually use the word. It's a much more modern concept that we've given the idea of Merlin the magician, Merlin the wizard, and so on, Merlin the enchanter. So I thought that was very interesting and just worth mentioning. Here, certainly he's none of those things. He is perhaps a warrior, perhaps certainly a poet, living in the forest of Caledon and describing the situation, how he feels, writing about something very raw that's happened to him right from inside. So I think without further ado, we'll go straight into the first one. Greetings, Oyanao, and we've omitted a few. We've omitted a few verses here, and because a lot of the poems here, you'll realize, are very prophetic. There are countless references to things that will happen. Now, most of the things referred to here happened a long time after the real Merlin or Merlin lived, if he lived at all, i.e. they're medieval. They're looking back, and obviously they were not written by him. They were written down by later writers who thought, oh, well, Merlin was a prophet, I'd better put some prophecies in. So you'll get a lot of stuff like that. And in not in all of them, but in some of the ones that we're going to read to you, we've omitted some of those things just as being not so accurate. Actually, I don't know why I said we were doing that one first. We're actually doing the Avalani or apple trees first, and then the ONI will follow. So here we go with the first one. So this is Merlin in the woods talking to a tree and talking to a pig and reminiscing about what happened to him before. Sweet apple tree, your branches delight me, luxuriantly budding my pride and joy. I prophesy before the Lord of Macri that on Wednesday in the valley of Makawi, blood will flow, Loigra's blades will shine. But here, O small pig, on Thursday the Cymry will rejoice. In their defence of Cymunawd, furiously cutting and thrusting, the Saisons will be slaughtered by our ashen spears, and their heads used as footballs. I prophesy the unvarnished truth, the rising of a child in the secluded south. Sweet and luxuriant apple tree, great are its branches, beautiful its form. I predict a battle, filling me with fear. At Penguin, men drink mead, but around Cymunawd is the deadly hewing by a chieftain from Uri, till only hatred remains. Sweet yellow apple tree, growing in Tal Arth, I predict a battle at Prydain in defense of frontiers. 7 ships will come across a wide lake, 700 men come to conquer. Of those that come, only 7 will return, according to my prophecy. Sweet apple tree of luxuriant growth, I used to find at its foot, when because of a maid I slept alone in the woods of Caitlín, shield on shoulder, sword on thigh. Here, small pig, listen to my words, as sweet as birds that sing on Monday when sovereigns come across the sea. The strength of the Cymry is blessed. Sweet apple tree in the glade, trodden is the earth at its base. The men of Rhyddach see me not, when these no longer loves nor greets me. I am hated by Rhyddach's strongest scion. I have destroyed both his son and daughter. Death visits them all, why not me? After Gwenddoleu, no will honour me, no diversions attend me, no fair women visit me. Though at Ardrey I wore a golden torque, the swan-white woman despises me. Sweet apple tree, growing by the river, who will thrive on your wondrous fruit? When my reason was intact, I used to lie at its foot with a fair, eager girl of slender form. Now 50 years, the plaything of lawless men, I have wandered in gloom among spirits. After great wealth, with vociferous minstrels, I have been here so long, not even spirits can lead me astray. I never sleep, but tremble at the thought of my Lord Gwenddoleu and my own native people. Long have I suffered unease and longing. May I receive freedom in the end. Sweet apple tree with delicate blossom, growing hidden in the wood, at daybreak the tale was told to me that my words had offended a powerful man. Not once, not twice, but 3 times in a day. Ah, that my end had come before the death of Gwendy's son was upon my hands. Sweet apple tree with your delicate blossom, growing amid the thickets of trees. The quiff line foretells a tale that will come to pass. a staff of gold, signifying bravery, will be given by the glorious dragon kings. The graceful one will vanquish the profane, and before a child, bright and bold, the Sisons shall fall, and bards flourish. Sweet apple tree of crimson colour, hidden in the wood of Caitlín, though men seek your fruit, their search is vain, and till Cadwallader, Cadfawn to Tawi river and Tawi's lands is come, till anger and anguish come from a Newyddion, and the long hairs are tamed. Sweet apple tree of crimson colour, growing concealed in the wood of Caitlín, though men seek your fruit, their search is vain, till Cadwallader comes from Rhydrion's meeting, and with Kynon advances against the Sisons. The victorious Cymry, glorious their leaders, shall have their rights again. All Britons rejoice, sounding their horns, chanting songs of joy and peace. So, lots of interesting references in there, maybe some references to Arthur and other topics that we've already touched upon. The next one we're going to do
is the Oyanai, which is translates as greetings, and in this one Merlin is speaking exclusively to the small pig that has been with him in the Caledonian forest, and here it is. Listen, small pig, happy small pig, don't go rooting on the mountaintop. Stay here instead, secluded in the wood, hidden from the dogs of Rothick the faithful. I will prophesy, it will be the truth. From Aber Taredir, the Cymry will be bound under one warlike leader of the line of Gwynedd. Usurpers of the Prydain, he will overcome them all. Listen, small pig. We should hide from the huntsmen of Mordai, lest we be discovered. If we escape, I'll not complain of fatigue. I'll predict from the back of the ninth wave the truth of the White One, who rode Dyfed to exhaustion, who built a church for those who only half believed. Until Cynan comes, nothing will be restored. Listen, listen, small pig. I lack sleep. Such a tumult of grief is within me. 50 years of pain I have endured. Once I saw Gwenddolai with the gift of princes, slaughtering prey on every side. Now he's beneath the sod, but restless still. He was the Lord of the North and the gentlest man. Listen, small pig, don't sleep yet. Rumours reach me of perjured chieftains, of tight-fisted farmers. Soon over the sea will come men in armour, two-faced men on armoured horses with destroying spears. And when that happens, war will come. Fields be ploughed but never reaped. Women will be cuckolds to the corpses of their men. And morning will come to Caer Sathliog. Listen, small pig, pig of truth. The Sibyl has told me a wondrous tale. I predict a summer full of fury, treachery among brothers. A pledge of peace will be required from Gwynedd. 700 ships from Gunt, blown in by the north wind, in Aberdeen they will confer. Listen, small pig, blessed pig. The Sibyl has told me a frightful thing. When Lloegre encamps in the lands of Ethlin, making Deganwy a strong fort between Lloegre and Cymru, a leaping child will appear, and the Franks will flee. At Aberdilais they will fall, sweating in bloody garments. Listen, small pig. Go to Gwynedd, seek a mate, where you will rest, while Rothick feasts in his hall. He does not know what sleeplessness I bear every night. Snow to my knees, ice in my hair, sad my fate. Listen, small pig, blessed pig. If you have seen all I have seen, you would not sleep nor root in the hill. Listen, small pig. Is not the mountain green? In my thin cloak I get no repose. I grow pale because Gwendydd does not come. Listen, small pig, oh bit of brawn, don't bury your snout. Love is neither pledge nor play. This advice I give to Gwenabwy, don't be a wanton. I'll predict now the battle of Macawy, where ruddy spears will shine in Rhiw Dundwy, the work of contentious chiefs. Men will sit, breasts heaving on their saddles, and there will be mourning and woeful looks. A bear will arise into High-Bath, whose men will infest Manui. A blessed fate awaits Gwendieth when Dyfed's prince comes to rule. Listen, small pig, are not the thorn buds green? Is not the mountain fair? The earth beautiful? I will predict the battle of Argoed Llafriram, bloody biers upon Owain's assault, when stewards dispute, when children are perjured, when Cadwaladr conquers Mona, the Saeson will be driven out. Listen, small pig, wonders there will be in Prydain, but I shall not care. When the people of Mone ask questions of the Britons, there will come a troublesome time. A superior lord will appear, Cunnan from the banks of the Tywee. Confusion will follow, but he shall have the music of bards to hear. Listen, small pig. Do you hear the birds at Caerleon? I wish I stood on Monmouth Mone, watching the bright ones dance. Instead, I'll prophesy battle after battle. At Macawy on a river, at Corsvocno at Minron, at Cuminaug at Caerleon, and the battle of Abergwaith, and the battle of Eithion. And when this music shall end, a child will come, and the Britons will know better days. Listen, small pig, O little spotted friend, can you hear the seabirds crying? A day will come when even minstrels will be sent away without their portion. Though they stand at the door, no gift will come. A far-flying seagull told me that strangers will come, Gwyddel, Brython, Roman. There will be confusion then, and the names of the gods will be taken in vain, fighting on both banks of the Tywee. Listen, small pig, O stout little one. Listen to the voices of the seabirds, great their clamour. Minstrels will get no honour, no fair portion theirs. In a time when hospitality is rejected, a youth with strong feelings will come. Then 2 Idrises will contend for the land, and their contention will be long. Listen, small pig, it's no use my hearing the scream of the gulls. My hair is thin, my covering also. The veils on my barn, but short on corn. My summer harvest brings small relief. Once my passion was boundless. Now I predict before the world ends, shameless women, passionless men. Listen, small pig, little trembling one, under this thin blanket I find no repose. Since the battle of Ardrey, I no longer care if the sky falls or the sea overflows. But I predict that after many kings, with one bridge on the Tow and another on the Tywee, there will be an end to war.
Love that. I love that one. The next poem I'm going to read is the dialogue. We're going to read the dialogue between Merlin and Taliesin. Taliesin, of course, was also a very famous Welsh bard, supposedly of the 6th century. And there are a lot of poems by him that may or may not have been written by him. But as with the Merlin poems, what happens is that the scribes who are copying these down will see a poem that they think has a kind of Merlin-esque feel about it, or a Taliesin-esque feel about it, and then they'll put that one in. So they aren't always necessarily by the people they're supposed to be. But in this one, we have a wonderful dialogue between these 2 bards and poets and visionaries, inspired by their own Owen, their inspiration, and as they almost strike sparks from each other as they read.
So they're actually discussing the Battle of Ardrey together.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. How sad, Cedvil, and Cadvan have fallen. The slaughter was terrible, shields shattered and bloody.
I saw Margun battling, a host acclaimed him.
Before two men battles they stand, before Erith and Gurith on pale horses, slender bay mounts they bring. Soon after comes the host of Elgan, alas for his death, after such a great journey.
Gut-toothed Rhys, his shield a span, to him came battle's blessing. Condir has fallen, deplorable beyond measure. Generous men have been slain, 3 notable men greatly esteemed by Elgan.
Again and again, in great throngs they came. There came Bran and Malgun to meet me. At the last, they slew Dale, the son of Urbin, with all his men.
Swiftly came Margun's men, warriors ready for battle, for slaughter armed. For this battle, Arderwydd, they have made a lifetime of preparation.
A host of spears flew high, drawing blood from a host of warriors. A host fleeting, a host wounded, a host bloody, retreating.
The 7 sons of Elithir, 7 heroes will fail to avoid 7 spears in the battle.
7 fires, 7 armies, Cynfallen in every 7th place.
7 spears, 7 rivers of blood, from 7 chieftains fallen.
7 score heroes maddened by battle in the forest of Celithon. Since I, Myrddyn, am second only to Taliesin, let my words be heard as truth. So, yes, I think Merlin gave in on that one, didn't he? And said Taliesin was a better poet than him. So the next one is a much longer poem. In fact, the original of it, it's very, very long, and we'd be here for ages if we read it all. And this is the dialogue. Actually, we're doing 2 poems here. The Fugitive poem of Merlin in his grave, and the dialogue of Merson and his sister Gwentheith. And it's the one of his sister that is so particularly lengthy that we had to exclude quite a lot of it. Again, prophecies that were mostly, I think, written with hindsight in the Middle Ages, because they refer to events that definitely had not happened or were even about to happen in Merlin's time. So we're going to start with this one, the Fugitive poem of Merson in his grave. And I suppose you could say that this is a bit like Merlin after he's been captured by whoever it is that captures him, Nimue or various other characters that have been mentioned, or maybe really from beyond. But anyway, once again, he's looking back at events that happened in his lifetime and a little bit forward as well. He who speaks from the grave knows that before 7 years King Mark will die. I have drunk from a bright cup with fierce and warlike lords. My name is Myrddyn, son of Morfran. I have drunk from a goblet with powerful warlords. Myrddyn is my given name. When the black wheel of oppression comes to destroy exhausted Loigra, defense will be bitter and sustained. The White Mount will see sorrow, a long regret to the people of the Cymry. Protection won't be found from the boar of the hosts, even in the heights of Ardrey, or of the Cymry's secret sports. When the red-haired Normans come, and a castle is built at Aberhodney, greatly taxed will be the Lloegrians. Predictions too will be costly. When the freckled one comes as far as Rhyd Bengan, men will face disgrace, their sword hilts will break. The new king of Prydain will be their judge. When Henry comes to claim Mur Castell on Uria's border, trouble across the sea will call him. When the pale one comes to London upon an ugly horse, he will call for the lords of Caergrain. Scarce the acorns, thick the corn, when a young king appears, causing men to tremble, a youth of great renown, conqueror of 100 cities, tender and frail will be his life. Towards the weak he will be strong. Towards the people of the uplands too, his coming will bring dark days. Wantonness will rule, women will be easy prey, Even children will need to confess. But a time of order will follow, when churls will do good deeds, maidens will be lovely, youths resolute. A time will follow near the end of the age, when the young will fail from adversity, and cuckoos die in May. There will be a time of hunting dogs, of buildings in secret places, when even a shirt will cost a fortune. There will be a time of profanity, when vices are active and churches empty. Words and relics will be broken, truth will vanish, falsehood spread, faith will grow weak, disputes abound. There will be a time when clothing seems delightful, when counselors become vagrants. Bards will go empty-handed, though priests are happy. Men will be despised and often refused. There will be a time of windless days without rain, with little ploughing and less food. 1 acre of land worth 9. Men will be weak and unmanly, and corn grow under trees, though feasts will still take place. When trees are held in high estate, there will be a new spring, but an evil king, a cowshed worth more than a cow. On Wednesday, a time of violence, blades will wear out. 2 will be bloodied at Cungan. At Abersor, there will be a council of men following on the battle, a bright ruler ruling the camp. In Aber Avon, and the host of Moan congregate, angles gather at Whindon. Myrddyn's valor will be long remembered. In Aberdever, a leader will fail from the actions of Gledig. After the battle of Abig, a battle will be on the River Birry, when Britons will have victory. Guria's men will be heroes. At Aberdawn, a battle will happen, and spears be unequal, blood on the brows of the Saxons. Servile you are today, Gwendydd. The mountain spirits come to me, here in Aber Carav.
So in the next poem, the dialogue between Myrddyn and his sister Gwendydd, Gwendydd is really kind of acting as his feed woman, asking him, so what will happen after that? And what will happen after that? So, so we have more of the state of Britain from prophecy.
And a little bit more about Gwendydd herself in a way, because she's a very shadowy figure. But it's very interesting that she refers to Merlin as her twin brother throughout this. So we've got some more clues here about who they might have been and how they were related.
I have come here to tell of the rule I have in the north. Every region's beauty is known to me.
Since the action of Ardrey and Eridon, Gwendydd and all that happened to me, I am dull of wits. Where shall I go for delight?
I speak to my twin brother, Myrddyn, wise man and diviner, since he is used to making disclosures when a woman goes to him.
I will sing like a simpleton, ominous with fears for the Cymry. The wind tells me Ruthercyle's standard cannot fall.
Though Rutherc is preeminent and all the Cymry under him, who can possibly follow him?
Ruthercyle, feller of foes, dealt many wounds on the blissful day at the ford of Towie.
Ruthercyle, while he is the enemy of the bardic city in Clyd, when will he come to the ford?
I will tell the fair Gwendydd, since she has asked so skillfully. After tomorrow, Rutherc will cease to be.
I ask my far-famed twin intrepid battler, who comes after Rutherc?
As Gwendoline was slain at bloody Ardrey, and I have come from amid the firs, Morgant Mar, son of Sanirem.
I ask my far-famed brother, who fosters song amid the streams, who will rule after Morgant?
As Gwendoline was slain at bloody Ardrey, and as I wonder why anyone should see me, the country will call to Urien.
As your hair is white as hoarfrost, and God has answered your need, who will rule after Urien?
Great affliction has fallen upon me, and I am sick of life. Malgwyn here will rule over Gwynedd.
I pine every time I leave my brother. Tears furrow my tired cheek. After Malgwyn, who will rule?
Run is his name, impetuous in battle, foremost in the rank of the army. Woe to Prydain when his day dawns.
I ask my profound brother, whom I have tenderly nourished, who will rule after that?
When a fool knows 3 languages in moan, and his son be honoured, Gwynedd will be rich.
Who will drive the Llogrians back? Who will move upon Dyfed? Who will succour the Cymry?
The great rout and tumult of Rhyddach, the armies of Cadwalladir, above the river Tardenen, the key will be broken.
Don't leave me here because you hate converse. What death will carry off Cadwallader?
A spear will pierce him, made of wood from a ship. That day will disgrace the Cymry.
Do not depart from me because you hate converse. How long will Caladir rule?
3 months of a long year, a full 300 days, with many battles he will rule.
Do not depart for fear of questioning. Who will be ruler after Cadwallader?
I declare to you, Gwendydd, from age to age I predict, after Cadwalladir, Cunda, a hand on the cross of every sword. Let all take care for their lives. With Cunda there is no reconciliation. I foretell that one prince will come, a prince of Gwynedd after much affliction, who will overcome all opposition. From that time, the Cymry will suffer without help, and failing in their hope, it is impossible to say who will rule. Gwendydd, delicate and fair, first will be the greatest of Prydain. Lament, wretched Cymry, when killing becomes the first duty, from sea to sea, across all the land. Is the world at an end, lady?
My twin brother, well have you answered me. Myrddyn, son of Morvran the skillful, yet your tale is sad.
I declare to you, Gwendydd, since you have asked me seriously, warfare, lady, will have no end. All that I have predicted to you, Gwendydd, this glory of princes will come to pass in the smallest detail.
Twin brother, since these things will happen, even to the souls of our brethren, what sovereign will come after?
Fairest Gwendydd, courteous one, I declare it powerfully. There will be no more kings.
Alas, dear one, for the separation to come after this tumult, you may well be placed in the earth by a king who was brave and fearless. I am left cheerless by the thought of your passing. A delay will be the best respite for he who has spoken truth. Arise from your rest. Open the book of Arwen without fear. Hear the discourse of a girl. Give repose to your dreams. Dead is Morgannai. Dead Cyfrenin Moriel. Dead is Morian, Bulch of battle. The heaviest grief is for you, Myrddyn.
I feel heavy affliction. Dead is Morgannai, dead Mordav, dead is Morian. I wish to die.
My only brother, chide me not. Since the battle of Ardrey, I have suffered. It is instruction I seek.
I also, I commend thee to the chieftain of chieftains, fair Gwendydd, refuge of songs.
Too long have my songs continued, concerning things to be. Would that they should come to pass.
I think you really have the voices of these characters here. Just a little bit more. Sorry, missed it. Gwendydd, be not dissatisfied. Have not all burdens been consigned to earth? Everyone must give up what he loves. While I live, I will not forsake you, and until death will keep you in mind. Your fear is the greatest weight.
Swift the steed, free the winds. I commend my blameless brother to the supreme Caer.
I too commend my sister to the supreme Caer.
Or heaven, in other words.
Yes, sorry about that, yes. These are the main poems of Merlin that come from the Black Book of Carmarthen. But there are one or two others, and one of them is known as Faery and Babon, sometimes pronounced as translated as commanding youth. I'll let Kathleen say a little bit more about that in a moment. It's a very difficult poem. and not an easy one to translate, but it does have some qualities to it. And it comes in a manuscript which has the dialogue of Merlin and Gwendolen and one of the other poems, the Avalana, I think, either side of it. So it's certainly considered very much, was considered by whoever compiled that later manuscript to be about Merlin.
So this poem, Parion Babon, is really written from the standpoint, as many of the others are, sort of post the Battle of Ardrey in 597. And it really is speaking about the conflict between Aidan McGavran and Ruthock, who were very briefly in an alliance. Unfortunately, they fell out, something happened, we're not entirely sure. But the name for Aidan McGavran, who of course was the Dalriadan leader at this time, and who actually died at the Battle of Degsaston in 603, was actually known to the British as Aidan Braddock, or Aidan the traitor, because he obviously Welshed on the deal, as they say. As for the commanding youth, the Parion Babon of this poem, he's not named. And as you've seen from some of the other poems, that Myrddyn is continuously prophesying a leaping child, a child who will come, someone who will arise, someone who will free the Britons from their yoke. And later on in medieval law, this youth who will come, who of course includes people like Arthur and many others, and it's a title that's been given to many, becomes for the Welsh people, who are the remnant of the British left in the land. He becomes known as the Mab Darogan, the prophesied child, the one who will come. And so this is in some way almost like a prophetic poem as a blessing, to sort of shore up the youth who is going to defend the island against all those who are coming, and very specifically Aidan, who is coming with his troops. Commanding youth, cease your sadness. God protect you from the Irish tribes on the road to the Irish hill, fiendish encounter, thick with Franks and Irish. Aidan will come across the spreading sea, and the hosts in their hundreds from Manaw will join him, from the island on the way to the Irish hill. Fiendish battle, mighty assault. Commanding youth, cease your sighing. Aidan will come across the spreading sea, but the youth will not be caught by thunder nor by lightning. Many forays and tramplings, many weapon holders in Aidan's pay, many long-headed lances, many tall spears come to seize the land. Gavran increases. Many breastplates, many helmets on heads intent on battle, many red swords, many gruff squires bent on warrior and slaughter. Many lively steeds, many light broad shields shining. And he says to Gwendolen, when daylight dawns, then the prophecy will unfold. And he says to Gwasawg, he respects neither shelter, fold, nor church. Commanding youth, stem your weeping. Out of the dark air we usually hear rain. Aidan will come with host after pelting host. But Gwendolen does not know what his hands will do. Brother joins zealously with brother, because they will not tolerate invasion here, nor oppression, except one who has been led into affliction. Alas, that loss of skill is upon him. Myrddyn, son of Morion, was a white hawk. Whenever there was fierce resistance to fight, whenever there was joyous death, whenever shields waved, whenever there was heart's bloods to avenge. Out of respect for the memory of Gwendolen and his companions, woe is upon me till death slow that day's approach. Commanding youth, take your counsel. It is natural that the generous take precedence. From Lothar Hyle's encounter may there be deliverance, but if it goes ill, no life will be spared. Mine have been the prophecies among the deeps and the shallows, with the van of battle because their courage. Once there was a time when I sat at court attired in red and purple, But today neither my cheek nor body is comely. It is easy for maidens to overlook me. Commanding youth, end your sadness. Lamentation is not joyful, nor is it best. Myrddyn will come, great his purpose, because of the slaughter of my brothers and Gwenddolai. Llywelyn, Gwgon, best of the generous, Einion, Rhywallon, lord of every battle, the clash of Rhyddok with Aiden at Alclwyd resounds clearly from north to south, and he says to Gwendydd, when the bright dawn breaks, the woods will be full of armed men. Commanding youth, seek your rest. It is normal to sing sweetly when sleep is desired. It is natural to give food to suppliants, natural for lovers to love each other. It is usual for there to be rivalry between equally matched men, but it is unusual for there to be hatred between men of one lineage. It is natural for an angry knight to be the leader of a host, and for ravens to stoop on carrion, and for flesh hooks to be black. It is unusual for the wicked to spare cheek or eye or brain pan, though he be attacked. Thus Merlin sang.
Oh, powerful stuff. Thank you.
It is.
So that's a selection, really, of these new translations of the poems attributed to Myrddyn. There are more in the book, but I hope you enjoyed these. But I thought before I look at the, looks like there are a lot of questions here on the chat room. See if we can come to those in a moment. But one more thing that I'd like to read to you. You may know of the very famous Renaissance magician Giordano Bruno, and it was recently discovered that he'd written 3 poems about Merlin, and 2 of these I've done new translations of to include in the book, which is coming out sometime later in the year. I'm not quite sure when anymore. So I thought I'd just share these with you to show how the tradition of Merlin and poetry, the prophetic quality, the strangeness, the rather tricksterish characteristics of Merlin were still very much alive in this period.
And how much he'd become part of any random prophecy, whatever.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Almost,
yes, if there was a
indeed.
prophecy. I mean, there were lots of, books of Merlin's prophecies all over the place, being published every year, attributed to him. Merlin's prophetic prophecies for 1644, Merlin's prophecies for 1645, and so on, kept going for a very long time. But I just thought this would be interesting to those of you who won't know these. They come from a book called De Umbris Idearum, and this one is called Merlin the Temperate Judge. In Phrygia lies a river named Gallus. Whoever drinks from it, even just a little, cures the body of all ills. If you drink till you are full, and till you are utterly alive, you need never drink again, according to the letters of the wise. Be civil in your life, rejoice greatly, for to drink too much brings trouble, tosses you madly about, flings you furiously around. Having made it thus far, to avoid more pain, choose mastery. Seek to honor wisdom, touch with the lips, smell with the nose, for it's not so good when the judge is in a hurry to pull the ears of Midas.
Okay, so this is another one of Bruno's poems from De Umbris Idearum. It's Merlin the Proper Judge. There are those who would use a dog to pull a plough, that would climb to the stars on a camel's back. There's a frog who would cross the river on a shrew's back, those who would hunt from the backs of asses, those who use wolves to hunt cuckoos, those who would like pigs to fly, who always use the wrong tools. This is not far from the organete vice, from digging or fishing or learning to fly, or to hunt with the right steeds. If you don't use the right kind of effort for flying, fishing, hunting, it won't be me who weeps, but you who navigates the labyrinth without a thread.
There's some good ones there. So let me have a little look here and see what questions we've got here. Thank you for those who enjoyed this. Good.
Yep. Yes, we've got.
From,
there are lots of interpolations in the poem. We have the prophecy of the youth, the myth that Henry was being aligned with during the Wars of the Roses. We really don't know which Henry it is. It's much more likely to be an earlier Henry, perhaps. But of course, the Pennyarth manuscript is a 15th century one, and we really are not clear exactly which of the many Henrys that England has produced is being spoken of here. It could even be Henry IV, because the Mad Darogan myth was coming up again at that time. And then we have, of course, Owen Glyndwr, to whom also this myth of the wondrous leader who would spring up and help everyone out was applied. So I don't know. Is the answer to that one.
Well, it looks as though everybody really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for your kind comments. As I said, we really just wanted to give you an experience of hearing these as poetry, maybe forgetting for a moment, how they fit or don't fit into the traditional shape of the Merlin myth. I mean, there's so much in them, though, as I'm sure you will have heard things that echoed things that other speakers have said earlier, or perhaps contradicted them. So they're a very important source, is what I'm trying to say here, because they fit so well with the, oh, thank you. We have soothing voices, apparently. That's very kind. Thank you very much.
Even when doing prophecies of death and
Yes.
slaughter, wow.
Yes, I mean, there's these huge catalogues of death and destruction in them all, and Merlin is pretty down, as you'd expect from his own experiences. And what comes out of this is this sort of pitiless catalogue of death, destruction, and doom, which are very much reflect the times in which he lived, or in which those who wrote the poems lived.
Yes, and it's interesting to think at the time of the Battle of Ardrey that the remaining British kingdoms were all still in touch with each other, all the way from Cornwall right the way up to Strathclyde. And it really wasn't until the Battle of Chester, which was in the early 7th century, that sort of long stretched out line of the British, which was all the way down the western coastline of Britain, began to be split up. And of course, one of the last of the northern kingdoms to go was Strathclyde. I know that there are many listening who are great aficionados of the Northern Arthur sort of belief. So this is a time, this is a very critical time when the British are all still very much in touch with each other, and what's going on easterly with the Saxon incursus that's been going on since the early 5th century. One has a sense of their grievance, and one also has the interpolated sense of, as the poems are taken up by the later Welsh kingdoms, that this is still a problem, because of course they are the part of Britain that is a part that has its own different languages, and is not included, or has been included in some instances, within the kingdoms of the Anglo-Saxons, that was at war with them, or later with the Norman kings as they come in. So these are poems that always have a currency to those who live in what we now call Wales.
Absolutely, yeah. So there's a great deal to be said about this. I mean, I was dialoguing a little earlier with Stephen Holden, and you'll be hearing earlier, about the very hotly contested aspect of, is Merlin from Scotland? Is Merlin from the Midlands? Is Merlin from the south, the east, the west, the north? I mean, these are all good points, and they're all things that we could all argue, I'm sure, for a very long time. But I think for me, it's rather like the same. It's the same with the Arthurian myth in general. Arthur and Merlin both belong to the whole of the country, not just to one place, and though we may be able to place either of them in very specific places, it doesn't always follow that that's important in the long run, because the myth of Merlin and the myth of Arthur are what are really important here, I think.
And I'm pleased when we think of myth as a living story that shows us something that is always true and not as a fallacy, because that's how we're using that word here. We've got some questions. In one of the poems we have the number 7, which is in the dialogue of Taliesin and Myrddyn. Is there someone asks if the number 7 is significant or has any other reference? And yes, of course, there are 7 that return from the raid on the other world, which Arthur takes, and of course it's a coda also in the story of Branwen in the Mabinogion, when again only 7 return. There is a reference to that there, but I think in this instance we have no further, we have no further warrant on that, I'm afraid.
I mean, 7 is a sacred number.
Yes,
of
indeed.
course,
Yes.
always has been.
And at this point, there are still 7 classical planets, for example, and 7 notes of music and so forth. And the 8th makes it the octave. So, so yes, it has that sort of thing. And what about the question about?
There's a nice question from Professor Ari Burke. Thank you for joining us. Why does he speak to an apple tree? Why a pig? And are there deeper meanings in these symbols? Well, apples, again, were very sacred and very important to the Celts. They seem to find them. Groves of apple trees appear again and again in the stories, and they're always considered to be sacred. They're always kind of
it's the otherworldly fruit.
Exactly.
It's the otherworldly fruit, because of course the only native apple to these islands is the crab apple, and it was the Romans that introduced the sweet apple, which has of course its roots in what we now call Turkey, or what would have then been Asia Minor. So apples are very much a sacred otherworldly kind of fruit. So he's sort of betwixt and between. He's in that sort of marginal place, that liminal place, not in society but in the wilds. And so he addresses the apple trees, I'm sure, in that way. And as for the pig,
go on.
Okay, and as for the pig, of course, the pig is chthonic animal, an animal of the earth that roots in the earth. And so it's everything between heaven and hell that he is experiencing, I think, and I'm sure that those are very purposely juxtaposed in that way. Someone else is also asking about the Battle of the Valley of the Black Pig, which is referred to by Yeats and Lady Gregory, and that's a very completely different pig, and that's to do with the Black Pig's Dyke, which is the natural barrier between Northern and Southern Ireland, which is a land feature in itself, and there's a whole other mythology. So no, I think it's a very different one, but it's the same kind of pig that we recognise from Tuachtruith in the story of Cilwch and Olwen, which is one of the earliest books of the Mabinogion. And that pig and the pig of the Black Pig's Dyke are very similar pigs. They're very uplifting earth kind of pigs, and that's what they do.
There's another question here from Eric Madden asking about what do we think of the idea that Merlin was a title. I don't accept that, because there's absolutely no evidence for it. This was something that Marion Zimmer Bradley came up with in her book, Mr. Babylon, and it rather caught hold of people, and it's been added to by several other writers since then. Susan Cooper also
has the Merlin, yes,
and I think
so it's a fictional
others.
It's a fictional construct, and of course we're in the land of myth, so other fictional constructs come to join it and become part of the myth, and everyone thinks they know that, in the same way that everyone sort of, when listening to people sort of talking about this, will say, but what about the bit when, he goes on the dragon's breath, and you think, hang on, that was John Borman's film, So all of these things sort of come together, I think, in a way. The fact that we have 2 Myrddins, of course, of South Wales and North Wales, or of Northern Britain, is itself interesting, that the myths appear at slightly different times in the 5th and then in the 6th century. So, you know, it's interesting.
I mean, one of the things that continues to fascinate me, yes, I think we agree
We
with,
went there, yeah.
with Danuta, yes. I think that as with the Arthurian legends generally, you know, they keep being added to, they keep growing and changing. We don't even know if Merlin, if he existed, was alive at the same time as Arthur, if he existed. But there are certain assumptions that you have to make when you work with this material. You have to believe that not everyone was making up stuff, that not every poet was contradicting another poet, that not every writer in the Middle Ages was just drawing on something they didn't understand. This is really to insult them, I think. It's the same with the Grail stories, and all right, don't get me started on the Grail.
We haven't the time.
This is not about the Grail, but just you know, as an example of this, that Chrétien de Troyes is often considered to be the first person who almost invented the Grail. I've heard this claimed. This is nonsense, because the material that he drew upon had been around for many hundreds of years before he was born. So, you know, this is the way we have to look at the material.
Yes, a myth has life.
Exactly.
And it's in a continual state of evolution, if you like. So to try and get back to original sources is the best that we can do. And this is what scholars do, of course, is to try and work from those. But of course, you're only making what is almost like a random sampling, because there's so much that we don't have and that has not survived. And that it only has its life within the living myth itself.
Interesting question here from Mario Kern. Are there any hints to the spiritual religious views of the Myrddyn Merlin as presented in medieval literature? Well, I mean, you've probably heard a little bit in the poems. You know, they're Christianized. They were written down by Christian copyists working from older material. It's very difficult to say. I don't feel quite as strongly as Adam does, for instance, that Merlin was somehow, you know, spearheading a kind of fifth column of pagans against Christians, because I think one of the things that's very little spoken about in this, when discussions of this, is the fact of how much the overlap there was between the two belief systems at that time, how many of the Christian ideas were borrowed from older ones, how many of the older ones looked ahead in some ways to seeing something that would later be recognized as Christian interpreting.
Indeed, and how early Christianity was established in Britain anyway. We know from a 6th century penitential that the British Christians, that's those that we would now call the Welsh, that the British Christians were taken to task in as late as 589 for not having gone out and Christianized the Anglo-Saxons. And why on earth were they not doing that? And of course, you know, we know the reason why, you know, that they were at war with them most of the time. But of course, that, you know, there are now very interesting studies, you know, of how much integration there was between the British and the Saxons. And how did we come to be speaking Anglo-Saxon derivatives of language rather than British ones? So that's a language discussion for another time. But I think things were much more mixed than we think they are. And that there wasn't a clear-cut modern distinction between you pagan, me Christian, there shall be no meeting between us, because I'm sure there were lots.
Yeah, much less oppositional than we've come to think these days.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're almost out of time, but let me just try to answer the last question here from Danuta Rain, asking about the concept of the archetype. I assume that you mean in a psychological way. I don't think that, I mean, I think archetypes have always existed, obviously, you know, not perhaps in quite the way that Jung and other psychologists have applied it, but I do think that it's quite reasonable to, you know, look at mythological characters and to see them as having an archetypal sense, both in the traditional meaning of that and also perhaps in the more modern psychological one, and that I think is why Myrddyn does have such a strong resonance for us in all of these stories.
I think so, because Myrddyn becomes an outsider. You know, this warrior, this king, who can also prophesy and make poetry. So he has all those three functions together. He becomes outcast through battle fatigue, through the sheer horror of war, and that will always resonate with us for as long as we live.
So I think that's all the time we have time for now, and thank you very much for listening. And
thank you guys. That was amazing. The feeling that comes through, it's so different than just the experience of reading them. And I think you guys really did a great job at making them a little bit more alive vocally, right? Like rhythmically able to be spoken aloud. The second one, Caitlín, that was incredible. The hair on my arms was standing up when you started. It was powerful. I think a lot of people were posting during that one as well. That was a really powerful one. I just wanted to ask one question. I thought it was very interesting. You know, you kind of are constantly coming back to this idea of like the living myth. And when you guys are reading this out loud, I'm kind of thinking back to all the generations of people who've also read these exact same poems, you know, from the 500s till the medieval to the Renaissance till now. And then when you bring in the final Bruno poems, you know, coming from the Renaissance, it's like, wow, it really is a myth that continues to evolve and continues to grow, even until today. Do you know when were those last two poems written? What decade?
Well, he was killed at the beginning of the 17th century, 1603. Someone correct me.
Okay, so he would have been in Prague at that time, I think.
Yeah.
And I think maybe John Dee would have been in Prague, right? Almost at the same exact time in Rudolph's court.
Some evidence that they met. I mean, I think one of the people who was on the lunchtime program, Peter Forshaw, would know this instantly, but unfortunately he's not part of this. But yeah, I think, I mean, there is some possibility. I think Dee might be just a little bit later. Well, I'm really not sure about that.
Dee's like 1560s.
Right, okay. Yeah. So it's possible. And
yeah, they would have met each other. Dee and Bruno would certainly have met each other, because he did come to Britain.
Yeah, and also Dee went to Prague. So
yes, indeed. So
yeah, so yes, it's likely. Yeah, but no, I mean, you yourself are a very good example, if I may say so, of this ongoing thing, because, you know, when you did your pilgrimages, I wouldn't call them anything other than that, really. Pilgrimages, I think, to this land and to Merlin's places, you know, you were keeping that myth, you know, consciously in your mind as you were doing that, and that's very important.
You did a modern Din Hanukkah, as the Irish would have called it. You know, the story journey, the story of the place.
Yeah.
Not until we actually physically are in that place, or physically with the myth, that we actually understand it much better, because the landscape tells us, you know, and informs us so much better. Like that wonderful question in the Vita Merlini, when all the people have come to try and, try and winkle Myrddyn out of his wood, and the only one that does it in the end is Taliesin. And Merlin asks him the question, why do we have weather? Which is not a question that anyone except someone actually in the north of Britain would ever ask, is it? You know, because
we still talk about it to this day.
You have nothing else but weather there. So.
Well, thank you guys so much. I know I'm looking forward to the new translations and the new book. I'm sure everybody else here is as well. Thank you for your time and being with us today and presenting us in such a new way these poems. It's been really, really nice.
And thank you to everybody who listened and all of those who said such nice things. Thank you.
Thank you.